Hi guys, Randall here. This week we are getting Eliza, who is frankly a really good ranged attackers of the ice element. Still, I feel like most players should not be going for her because within the next 3 months we are going to get another ranged ice attacker who's going to be a cost 100 instead, and this one will have a passive that reduces their movement, putting her in a lot less danger for auto gameplay. So if you're looking for a ranged attacker that's going to be a manual powerhouse, then Eliza is good, but I know the manual community is quite small within War of the Visions, and if you're looking for somebody who's going to be very strong in auto and be able to win you some arena or guild battles, then you should probably just hold off on Eliza and instead go for the other one that's going to be released in a while, because an archer having less movement means an archer putting themselves in less danger. It's really that simple. Still, today we'll take a look at Eliza, her kit, how you could leverage her, how to build her, which runes to use, and etc. So let's dive in. One of the pros of Eliza is she has an insanely long range. She does have +3 range in her passives, which is as much as any unit gets, but then some of her moves have really a better range than a lot of other units, especially her limit break, so she is able to hit from a very long distance. She also sets herself up. She's able to lower defense, CT, AP, build chains, remove protect and shell, so nobody can survive her damage for a very long time, which is a really good thing for a ranged attacker. She can also decreases the enemy's movement, so she's got a couple options to make sure they don't reach her too quickly, and she does have a jump of 2, so she's able to go on higher ground to shoot even further, which is something I like about the sniper sub job, and then she just has the same movement as a sniper. So before we go too deep, let's take a look at her stats, and you'll notice in the middle there is Alaya Rundal, who is going to be the cost 100 ice ranged attacker that I was talking about. So we're going to compare Eliza to her and Setia. The other two are cost 100, so I would expect Eliza to lose in the stat comparison, but let's take a look. First things first, Eliza is very squishy. With only 3k HP and no really high amounts of resistances anywhere or in it defense or spirit, she is going to die very quickly. Alaya does have a bit of a better tankiness. She also has the Paladin subjobs. She can make herself more tanky, which is not the case for Eliza. And then Setia has some passives that increases her resistances, so and some abilities that increases her slash and magic resistance, so she's actually a bit harder to kill. I've seen Setia live 2 hits against some of the strongest attackers in the game. I would expect Eliza to die in a single hit against just about anybody, so she is kind of like Frederica, one of those squishy archers that's going to be in the back. Whenever the enemy reaches her, she will die. In terms of offense, she has a fairly high amount of attack at 448, but it is lower than the other two. She makes up for that by having really high agility at 67, so she is going to play very fast. That's really good for her. She's got a decent amount of luck at 230 as well, so it is quite possible to make her accurate. Especially for the ice element, ice has a lot of vision cards that increases accuracy, so I'm not too scared in that department. She is going to have a good ability to take her enemies down and not be missing her attacks. She also has a guaranteed hit or a lot of a really good accuracy buff within her kit, so she's got ways to make up for that. And then generally, she's got resistance to stop, which I think is one of the most annoying status effects in the game, so that's good, but no resistance to anything else that's going to be very crippling in a fight like Disable, so you do have to be wary of status effects when using her. So let's look at her passives, and for a ranged attacker, the range up passives are usually the most important. I think for every single fight, you want her unique passive that gives her range up 2 and missile attack 15. That is definitely a must. Then if it's a very short map and you don't want her to be hitting from turn 1, but rather use a buff before she starts attacking the enemy team, you might not want the other range up passive, so it'll really depend on the map. If you're not using the extra range up, I would certainly go for the Trick Lancer mastery that gives you crit rate and defense penetration, because she doesn't have a whole lot of other defense penetration in her kit. So with this, she could be hitting a tank like Joom or any other tank with a lot of defense and still be dealing significant damage. So I would hesitate between a bit more range or defense penetration, and I think that's really the best way to go with it. And then in terms of counters, she has access to reflex, so you're putting reflex and you're not even looking at the other options. That is the best counter she can use. Now let's look at her main job, and it's actually packed with quite a few really good abilities. Her init low cost ability has a cost of 15, which is fairly high. A lot of units have a cost of 12 in this ability, but it's not the end of the world. It's going to do okay damage and have a chance to berserk. Now, Eliza being a unit that's going to get one-shot by most attacks, you'll probably want to put her at high faith to increase her chance of landing status effects, because it doesn't really matter whether she takes a bit more damage from magical attacks. They will take her down in a single hit more often than not. So I would have a decent chance of berserking with this. Then she's got a buff that increases agility for herself and allies around her, which is really good, and then increases her own attack a little bit. I like that. Extra agility is always a good thing. And then we start looking at the more interesting abilities. She's got a square-shaped 165 mod, so average damage ability, that will decrease CT by 15% of what the enemies have currently accumulated. So it will make their next turn a little bit slower. It's not a massive swing, but if you're able to use this 2 or 3 times before they reach your team, then you might have had a better ability to lap them and then just hit them an extra time. So overall, not a bad thing to have. The AoE is really where this ability has a lot of value though. Then Triple Arrow is kind of insane. It's a 3-hit attack that is going to decrease AP if you perform a crit, but you have 3 chances to crit, so it's going to happen very often. And Eliza does have a really good init crit chance. Ice does have vision cards that increase critical chance as well, so I would expect this to do indeed drain 20 AP every time you use it. What's really fun about this is it also sets you up with a chain. Now, usually in a team, I will not run 2 archers because it makes my backline a little bit too squishy for me, but if you were to pair her with either another ice unit that's going to cap the ice chain, or another ice missile attacker like Rafal, and you're going to use the spell spread on top of that, just cap the chain damage, then you will hit for a very large amount of damage, and that's a very interesting setup. Then she's got an attack that decreases defense before dealing damage, so that's also really good, especially if you're hitting an enemy with low init defense. You're going to throw that into the negatives, and you'll amplify your damage instead, because a flat decrease can actually go into the negatives. And then finally, an AoE hit that dispels Protect and Shell before dealing damage. I think that's really tailored towards taking down units like Charlotte or Joom that have Protect and Shell in their own kit before moving in, so it's going to be relevant against tanks, but really, these statuses are more common now that Joker has them. A lot of the meta units actually use Protect and Shell, so I feel like it's a really nice addition to her kit. One thing you might notice though is there are no barrier breaks so far, so that's something she could struggle against. Is if an enemy uses a 50% physical barrier for a couple hits, she's going to have to use the 3-hit chain in order to go through that. She doesn't have something to just ignore the barrier and deal damage at the same time. Now, another really important part of Eliza's kit is her limit break, which look at the range on that. That ability hits further than basically anything else in the game. It decreases ice resistance before dealing damage at a 200 mod, while also then decreasing the enemy's movement for 3 turns, which is nice because you're going to have more chances to hit them. This is insanely good, and it is part of why Eliza's so good, but it does have a really high AP cost, and that's a common theme alongside her abilities, so if she doesn't use bells, she will run out of steam very quickly, which is why you'll see me running that TMR in the build I'll show in a short while. Then in terms of sub-jobs, I frankly think all 3 of her sub-jobs are competitive for different reasons, so that's very interesting. Her Hunter sub-job has 2 things that are really useful for her. It gives her a range up buff, which she doesn't have in her main job, so if you want her to hit from as far as you can, you kind of need that. This also increases her accuracy by 60, and when we'll look at the build I'm making a little bit further, it is quite easy for her to have an accuracy of 170 with something like this, and she will be able to hit evasion units very reliably, even if she's not using guaranteed hit moves thanks to this buff. Then it also gives her access to a move that has defense penetration and missile resistance penetration. So this is kind of your tank busting move. If you're finding an enemy that you should normally not be able to damage well, you will have access to this move to do it. It does have a casting time though, so that could be an issue. You could die before the arrow actually goes out. We know currently we're fighting teams with 2 agility up vision cards, units that go very, very fast, so having a casting time is actually a major liability in my book. Still, it is one way to penetrate missile resistance and defense penetration that she doesn't otherwise have in her main job. Second, sub-job is the Trick Lancer job, and we've seen Winter Luartha wreak havoc with that. It is a really good job. First of all, the Lancer abilities from this job scale off of 120% of your attack, which is a lot more than a lot of jobs. For example, her main job has only 100% of her attack and then a bit of dexterity and luck scaling. This is going to hit a lot harder just because of the way the attack scaling works. It also brings her with the option of having a healing power down move, which could be relevant at a still pretty long range because it's a javelin throw, and then it gives her the ability to decrease healing power, which could also be relevant. The one thing that I wish she had but doesn't have in there is the barrier break, so again, you don't really get any new tools for this. The main reason you would use the Trick Lancer sub-job is if you're fighting an enemy team that you expect they're going to have a lot of missile resistance. You don't necessarily want to have just that one sub-job move that has missile resistance penetration. Instead, you can just be a Trick Lancer and throw these javelins from a long distance and do pierce attacks, which will still hit very hard. So that would be the main reason to run this. Otherwise, the other job she has is Ranger. Ranger has really bad TP skills, so that's one liability. I would probably use her own sub over this more often than not, but what you do get that's really good is Sharpshoot. Sharpshoot is a very long range attack that is a guaranteed hit. If you're fighting max evasion units and you don't want to take a chance with the accuracy up buff, or you don't have accuracy up gear enough to get her to a reliable level, then you just run this. You have 4 casts of a guaranteed hit that are going to be able to take down these pesky evasion units, and that would really be the main reason to run the Ranger sub, in my opinion. Now, onto my sample build, and here we are. She's got 7.5k HP, which might seem like a lot, but realistically, I see dark units hitting for 10,000 very easily on units. Yeah, it's not enough. Not a lot of defense either, only 25. If the enemy has a defense down move, she actually can go down into the negatives. 42 slash resistance penetration might be good, it might save her, but then again, depending on the enemy, it might not as well. What she does have that's really good, though, is 1400 attack, which is insane for ranged attackers. Typically, when I build my Satya for a very acceptable amount of damage, she's got somewhere between 12 and 1300 attack, and Eliza has a lot more than that with the current setup we're using. She also has 103 agility, which is fairly fast, it's really good, 545 dex, so really good crit rate, and a bit of extra damage because of the way her damage scaling works, and then 381 luck and 111 accuracy means that she will hit most enemies very reliably, especially if you pair that with her 60 accuracy buff from her main job. So there are a bunch of really good options here. I feel like her damage will be very high, but again, a very high risk unit because the second the enemy team reaches her, she goes down. And we know the ice element is not known for its tanks. You can always use Freyevia, but outside of that, we don't have a lot of current options for tanking in the ice department. The runes that I'm using in this setup are as follows, so I would say you probably want luck almost every time because there's no real other setup that is better for her. You could try to go for tankiness or bulk runes like HP, but I feel like it's not going to be enough to save her if she actually gets hit, so you might as well just increase your hit chance with some extra luck. And then the passives, luck, HP always, and then a little bit of resistances, hoping to maybe survive, but it's really just the common passives here. On the offensive side, though, there's a lot of really good options. You could go for agility runes if you want to go a little bit faster, maybe get another shot off, but I felt like since she doesn't have a whole lot of defense penetration, going for the attack runes would be better, because you do get a bit of extra defense penetration, a bit of extra attack as well, and then the passives can continue to cover you in that scenario. So you can get 10 more defense penetration, a bit of ice attack, then crit damage and dex, because she already has a really good amount of dexterity, so you can just throw that up the roof, increase the crit rate via the dex nodes, and then the crit damage just increases your nodes across the board. And then 20% attack, of course, and missile resistance penetration. So that really seemed to me like the optimal setup. You could try something different, let me know your thoughts, but I feel like this is going to be very powerful. So now that we've said all this, why would you not pull for her? Well, the reason is really simple. Eliza has the same AI as Frederica and other range attackers. She's going to use spells, move 3 squares towards the enemy team, and eventually get caught in an AoE and die, if you're thinking in Odo. And then there is going to be another ice, cost 100 unit this time, that's going to have an init movement of 3 for the first couple turns of combat, so she will be in a lot less danger. There's less chances she gets caught, just dies before she does her job, and just because of that, she is going to be a massively better unit. At least if we're thinking Odo, guild battles, and this types of game modes. So I feel like players that go for Eliza are players that really want a short-term solution to win teams being strong, but outside of that, she is not going to be a very long-term unit, and I don't really see players running double archers with a single tank for the ice element. I don't think that's going to be much of a thing when you have other options like Velis, who's going to heal back and then haste everybody, or other very strong attackers like Aranea that you could use. So that's really my train of thought. Another thing to mention is she is in the permanent pool. If you're skipping her now, you are not locking yourself out of using Eliza ever within your account. You will be able to naturally pull her at some point. And then within the next 2 weeks, I am expecting summer banners to be a thing. So I'm expecting us to get whatever unit we'll get during the summer banners. They are usually extremely powerful and meta defining because we get them at the same time as JP does, so that puts them a little bit ahead of the curve for us. So yeah, I feel like don't spend everything on Eliza and then be forced to sit out on a very strong potential summer unit. That would be a shame in my opinion. But this is it from me. It's my current train of thought. Personally, I really love Eliza's design. I would love to play her because I just love how she looks, and I love manual gameplay. She does seem to be very well tailored towards this, but I'll still probably skip. Just be wise and save my viz for something that will be more defining for my account. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll be back soon with another video, and have a great rest of your day.